You are standing on a dock with two listings open on your phone. Both say Bluewater Cruiser, both say ready to sail. One is $9,000 cheaper, and every instinct you have is screaming that the cheap one is the trap. Here is what I found after chasing this for months. The cheaper boat is not always the mistake. Sometimes the expensive one hides a $15,000 problem that no listing will ever print, and the difference comes down to a single build year and a resin nobody talks about. I have owned these boats. I have paid for these mistakes. I have watched friends sink their savings into the wrong hull. So today I am putting the most famous used cruisers head to head under the same cold light, and I am holding one verdict back until the end. It involves a legendary 40-foot design, a shipyard in Washington State, and a run of hull numbers that quietly turned a dream boat into a money pit. Whether this is your first cruising boat or the upgrade you have promised yourself for 20 years, this is the comparison the seller is hoping you never run. Let me take you back to a boat I inspected 2 autumns ago, a Tayana 37, teak decks glowing in the afternoon light, priced like a bargain. I ran my thumb along the seam where the deck met the cabin trunk and felt the softness. That one soft spot told me the next owner was looking at a $20,000 deck job. The seller had no idea. Or he did, and the photos were shot from just the right angle. That is the day I stopped trusting a good-looking listing and started trusting the evidence. So let me show you the evidence. The first thing every buyer argues about is the keel. Full keel or fin keel. You will read 100 forum posts swearing a full keel is the only safe choice for crossing oceans, and 100 more calling it slow, heavy, and impossible to back into a slip. I chased this argument for years, and I am telling you it is the wrong argument. It is a distraction that keeps you from looking at the thing that actually empties your bank account. Here is what really matters. It is not the shape of the keel. It is how the ballast is attached to the boat and how the boat was built in the specific year it left the shed. Take the Cape Dory 36, designed by Carl Alberg and built in Massachusetts through the late 1970s and into the 1980s. That boat has an encapsulated keel, which means the lead ballast is sealed inside the fiberglass of the hull itself. There are no keel bolts to rust, no keel joint to weep, no smile cracking open at the leading edge. On the other side, you have dozens of production boats from the same era with an external lead or iron keel bolted on with steel bolts, and those bolts are the quiet clock ticking under your feet. I have watched a survey stop cold over rusted keel bolts. I have seen the estimate to drop a keel, clean the mating surface, replace the bolts, and rebed the whole assembly run past $8,000, and that is before anyone touches the smile crack that let the water in to begin with. The listing will say keel bolts sound. The listing does not tell you they have never been touched in 40 years. So on this first round, the encapsulated keel boats win on cost of ownership, plain and simple. The Cape Dory takes an early lead. But do not fall in love yet, because an encapsulated keel hides its own secret. And if you run this boat hard aground on a reef, that sealed lead can crack the fiberglass and let water wick into the ballast where you cannot see it or dry it out. Nothing on these boats is free, which brings me to the thing sitting under the cockpit that costs more than the keel ever will. The engine. This is where I watch buyers make a $40,000 decision based on a 2-minute test where the owner starts the motor at the dock and lets it idle. It sounds fine. It always sounds fine at idle. That tells you almost nothing. Here is the split that actually matters. A huge number of American cruising boats built in the 1970s came with the Atomic 4, a little gasoline engine made by Universal. It is smooth, it is quiet, and there are thousands still running. But it is gasoline sitting in a cruising boat, and gasoline fumes in a bilge are the reason those boats need a blower and the reason a lot of insurers and a lot of buyers walk away. Compare that to the diesel boats of the same years, the ones with a Perkins 4108 or an early Yanmar, and the math changes completely. Now, a running Atomic 4 is not a disaster. People cross oceans with them, but if you want to repower to a modern diesel, and most serious cruisers eventually do, you are looking at somewhere between $12,000 and $20,000 by the time you buy the engine, the mounts, the new shaft coupling, the exhaust, the panel, and the labor to wrestle the old one out through a companionway that was never designed to let it pass. I have paid for this. I budgeted $14,000, and the real number came in just under $17,000 because once the old engine was out, we found the engine beds were soaked in oil and had to be rebuilt. So look at two nearly identical listings, same designer, same length, same year. One has the original gas engine, one was repowered with a Yanmar 8 years ago. The repowered boat is priced $15,000 higher. The buyer sees the higher price as the worst deal. The buyer is wrong. The repowered boat is the bargain because someone already spent $17,000 of pain, so you do not have to. But even a fresh diesel does not settle the verdict because there is a system on these boats that fails more quietly than any engine. And when it lets go, it does not strand you at the dock. It drops your rig into the water. I want to talk about chain plates, and I want to talk directly to those of you watching this who already own a cruising boat and think this whole comparison is only for the first-time buyer. Stay with me, because this next part is for you specifically, and it is something you can check this weekend without a broker, without a haul out, and without spending a dime. Chain plates are the metal straps that anchor your shrouds and stays to the hull. They hold the mast up. On a lot of classic cruisers, the chain plates are bolted to a wooden bulkhead below deck, and they pass through the deck at a slot that is sealed with caulk. That slot is the enemy. For 30 or 40 years, every rain, every wave over the bow, every dew-soaked morning, a tiny bit of water sneaks down that slot and sits against the top of the bulkhead and against the stainless steel of the chain plate itself. Two things happen. The plywood bulkhead goes soft and black at the top, losing its grip on the bolts. And the stainless steel, starved of oxygen right where it passes through the deck, develops what is called crevice corrosion, cracking on the inside where you cannot see it. The plate looks perfect above deck and below deck. It fails in the 2 inches hidden inside the deck. So here is what you do, whether you are surveying a boat to buy or standing on the one you already own. Go below, find where the chain plate's attached to the bulkhead. Look at the top edge of that bulkhead where it meets the underside of the deck and look for black staining, streaking, or a wavy, swollen look in the wood. Press it with your thumb. Firm plywood is fine. Anything that gives is water damage. Then look at the deck slot from above. If the caulk is cracked, old, or you can see rust weeping out of it, that is water getting in right now. This costs nothing to check, and it can save your mast and your life. On the boats I compared, the ones with external chain plates bolted to the outside of the hull, you can see everything, and they win this round easily. The ones with chain plates buried in the deck and tabbed to interior bulkheads are the ones where replacement means cutting into the interior, and a full chain plate and bulkhead job on a 36 to 40 foot boat can run from $4,000 to $10,000 depending on how much wood is gone. For those of you who already own your boat, go do that thumb test before your next sail. I mean it. If the wood is soft, you do not have a someday problem, you have a right now problem, and I would rather you hear it from me than from a rigger after the mast is already leaning. Now, so far, the encapsulated Keel Cape Dory is winning on ballast, the diesel boats are winning on engine, and the external chain plate boats are winning on rigging. If you are keeping score, you might think the answer is obvious. It is not. And here is the criterion that reshuffles the whole ranking. Decks, specifically cord decks and the teak laid on top of them. Almost every fiberglass cruiser from the 1970s onward has a deck built like a sandwich with a core of balsa wood or foam between two skins of fiberglass. That core makes the deck stiff and light. It also rots silently for decades. Every time water gets in through a leaking stanchion base, a cleat, a handrail bolt, or a chain plate slot. When you step on the deck and it feels spongy, that is wet core, and recoring a deck is one of the most expensive, most miserable jobs in all of boat ownership. I have seen quotes north of $25,000 for a full deck recore on a 40-footer. That single number can flip your entire verdict. Now put teak on top of that deck. Those beautiful teak decks on the Taiwanese-built boats, the Tayana 37 designed by Robert Perry, built by Taiyang in Taiwan starting in the mid-1970s with more than 600 hulls made. That teak is stunning in the photos. It is also thousands of screws drilled through your deck skin into your core. Every screw is a potential leak. As the teak wears thin, the screw heads start to show, the bungs pop out, and water finds its way down every one of those holes into the balsa below. The listing says, teak decks. It shows you a sunlit photo of warm, oiled wood. It does not say that removing worn teak decks, filling thousands of screw holes, and reglassing the deck is a job that starts around $15,000 and climbs from there. It does not say that if you leave the teak on and it is already leaking, you are feeding water into a core that will cost you double to fix later. So the Tiana, which was winning hearts on looks and on that gorgeous Perry hull, suddenly carries a risk the Cape Dory with its simpler non-teak deck does not. Here is the honest part though. A Tiana 37 with the teak already removed and the deck properly glassed, or one that was ordered without teak decks in the first place, is a phenomenal boat that just had its most expensive problem solved by a previous owner. Once again, the scary-looking history can be the smart buy if you know exactly what you are looking at. And that is the pattern I kept slamming into over and over in every forum thread and every survey report I read. The number that decides whether a boat is a treasure or a trap is almost never in the listing. Someone, somewhere, already knew. And the way these boats get sold is built to keep that knowledge on the seller's side of the table. If you want to go deeper on exactly how to read that knowledge before you ever step on a dock, I put everything I know about this process into a series of books called Sail Smart, Deep Water, and Sail Clear. They cover the full arc of buying, preparing, and actually sailing a cruising boat without getting buried by the costs that the listings leave out. Everything from surveying tactics to the questions that make sellers uncomfortable to the systems most buyers never check until something goes wrong offshore. The details on where to find them are in the description below. Now, with that framework in mind, let me show you exactly how this plays out in the most dangerous comparison of all. Think about who writes a listing. A broker who gets paid when the boat sells, or an owner who wants out from under the dock fees. Neither of them profits from telling you the deck is wet, or the chain plates are buried, or the engine is a gas motor an insurer will frown at. The comparison that would actually protect you, the one that lines these boats up side by side on cost of ownership instead of asking price, is a comparison nobody selling you a boat has any reason to run. So it never gets run. The glossy photo does its job, the survey happens after you have already fallen in love, and the hidden number surfaces the season after the money is gone. But there is one boat in this comparison where the hidden number is so specific, so tied to an exact place and an exact stretch of years, that I have to slow down and lay the whole thing out, because this is the finale. And it is the one I would tattoo on the arm of anyone shopping in this class. The Valiant 40. If you have spent any time researching bluewater cruisers, you already have a warm feeling about this boat, and you should. Robert Perry designed the Valiant 40, and it launched around 1973. It is often called the boat that started the entire performance cruiser movement, the one that proved a boat could cross oceans safely and still actually sail well instead of wallowing like a barge. Owners circumnavigate in them, sailors love them. On paper and on the water, the Valiant 40 deserves its legend. So why, when you scroll the listings, are some Valiant 40s priced tens of thousands of dollars below others of the exact same length and vintage? The listings will not tell you. They will show you the same teak interior, the same canoe stern, the same handsome sheer. They will use the same word, classic, over and over. And a huge number of buyers assume the cheaper ones just need a little love. Here is what those buyers do not know. And here is the finding I promised you at the very start. The early Valiant 40s were built by a company called Uniflight in Bellingham, Washington, and for a stretch of production years, running roughly from the mid-1970s into the early 1980s, the hulls were laid up using a fire-retardant resin. That resin, over time, in contact with water, did something catastrophic. The hulls developed severe, deep, relentless blistering. Not the little cosmetic pocks that a lot of old fiberglass gets. Big, structural, weeping blisters across the entire underbody. the kind that come back no matter how many times you grind and dry and bury or coat them. Sailors started calling them, quietly and painfully, the blister boats. This is not a rumor I heard at a bar. This is documented, discussed for decades on owner forums, known to every good surveyor who works on older bluewater boats, and it is the single reason the resale value of those specific hull years collapsed while the rest of the Valiant name stayed golden. The blistering on the affected boats was so persistent that some owners spent tens of thousands of dollars chasing it, and it still came back, because the problem was not on the surface, it was baked into the resin of the laminate itself. Now here is the part that turns this from a horror story into your advantage. The Valiant 40s built before that resin came into use, and the ones built after production moved, are not affected the same way. When Valiant production moved to Texas in the mid-1980s, under Valiant yachts, the resin problem was left behind. Those later Texas-built boats and the very earliest hulls do not carry the same blistering curse. Same designer, same beautiful Perry lines, same legendary reputation, completely different destiny under the waterline, decided entirely by which shed the hull was laid up in and in which year. So the verdict on the Valiant 40 is not that it is a good boat or a bad boat. The verdict is that it is two different boats wearing the same name, and the only thing separating a bargain of a lifetime from a bottomless refit is a hull number and a build year that the seller has no incentive to explain to you. And this is the thing you can act on this week, before you fly across the country to look at one, before you pay a surveyor, before you fall in love on the dock. When you find a Valiant 40 listing, the first question out of your mouth is not, how are the sales or how is the engine? It is what year and where was the hull built and what is the hull identification number. You research whether that hull falls in the Uniflight blister era or outside it. You ask directly whether the boat has a documented history of blistering and how many times the bottom has been redone. A seller with a clean, early boat or a clean Texas boat will answer proudly. A seller sitting on a blister hull will get vague, will change the subject, will tell you all old boats blister a little. That vagueness is your answer. The honest comparison always existed. The surveyors knew, the long-time owners knew, the forums preserved it in thread after thread going back decades. The sellers of the bad hulls had every reason to bury it under a beautiful photograph and the word classic, and now you know it too, which means you are the one buyer walking that dock who cannot be sold the wrong Valiant. Let me pull the whole investigation back together, because the individual rounds tell a bigger story than any single winner. The Cape Dory 36, with Carl Alberg's encapsulated keel, took the ballast round because it removed the keel bolt time bomb entirely. But it is a heavier, slower boat, and the encapsulated lead has its own grounding risk. The diesel boats beat the Atomic 4 gas boats on the engine round, but a well-maintained gas boat that is priced honestly can still be a smart entry if you never intend to repower. The external chainplate boats beat the buried chainplate boats on rigging because you can see the truth instead of guessing at it. The non-teak decks beat the teak decks on long-term cost, but a Tiana that already had its teak removed and its deck reglassed is a boat whose worst bill has already been paid, and the Valiant 40 sits above all of it as the perfect lesson, because it proves that the make and model on the listing is almost meaningless without the year, the yard, and the hull number. Two boats can share a designer, a length, and a legend, and still be separated by a $20,000 difference in what they will cost you to keep afloat. That is the honest way into a cruising boat without going broke. You do not chase the lowest asking price, and you do not chase the prettiest photo. You chase the boat whose expensive problems have already been solved by someone else, and you run from the boat whose expensive problems are still hiding. No matter how good the price looks, the bargain is never the cheapest boat. The bargain is the boat where a previous owner already spent the painful money and priced it like they had not. Here's what I want you to carry off this dock. The right cruising boat is not the one with the fewest problems on the day you buy it. It is the one whose problems you saw coming, priced in, and chose with your eyes open. That is the difference between the sailor out on the water next season and the one still sanding a hull in a boatyard, watching his savings drain into a project he did not sign up for. You did not come here for a sales pitch. You came here because you want the verdict a broker will never hand you, the one that costs them a commission to say out loud. That tells me exactly the kind of buyer you are, and it is the only kind I make these for. So let me ask you something specific, and I want you to actually answer me in the comments. Which two boats are on your short list right now, the ones you keep flipping between at night, and does either one of them have teak decks or a chain plate you have never actually inspected below the deck line? Tell me the models. Tell me where you are watching from, and whether this is your first cruising boat or the upgrade you have waited half your life for. I read these, and I answer them, because the questions you ask are how I decide which comparison to run next. If you want to stand on every dock from here on out with the honest comparison in your pocket instead of the glossy one the seller hands you, then come with me. This is a place for buyers who refuse to be sold, who want the number under the waterline, not the word classic on the listing. Subscribe and stay, because the next investigation is one I have been dreading and itching to run at the same time. A beloved center cockpit cruiser with a fuel tank problem hidden in a place you cannot reach without cutting the boat open, and a build year where it quietly got fixed. You are going to want to know that hull number before you go looking. I know some of you are still standing on that dock with two listings open. That's exactly where my membership, the Cruising Compass, picks up the buyer's inspection checklist this video only started. Ask me your own questions, and I answer you myself, not some bot. You'd be joining thousands of sailboat buyers already in there with you. Just point your phone's camera at the code on the screen and cancel anytime with one click.